this meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, August 11th. Beth, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Bondi, Mrs. Gephardt.
Here.
Mr. Gousset.
Here.
Mr. Truitt.
Here.
And Ms. Wassman.
Here.
Eric Bodie is listening in electronically this meeting. Under Ohio law, he cannot vote if he's not physically here, but certainly is able to participate in that manner. So this computer is him. So actually, please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. Before we get started, the agendas are on the back table. If you had a chance to grab one of those, I imagine we all know that there's probably one item that most people are here for. We will go through the order of the agenda, but when we get to the action items, any board decision about masks will be at the top of that. So we'd love for you to stay, and you're welcome to stay for the whole meeting, but please don't feel bad if you get up and walk out after the part that you're interested in is finished. So with that being said, do we have, we need to go over something for the IDEA Part B funds?
Yes, thank you. So we are required to have a public hearing with respect to special education IDEA Part B funds. And so it is my obligation to share with those present that we primarily spend our IDEA Part B funds on intervention for our students. So that could be in the form of social, emotional, behavioral interventions. And so the purpose of this is if anyone has any issue or questions or problems with how we have allocated those funds, now would be your opportunity to share your views about that. Okay, hearing none, thank you.
We'll go into resignation and presentation. So this will be the point in the agenda for folks that want to address the board and public comment are certainly more than welcome to do so. A couple quick notes on the back table also. We do not have a presentation this evening that we had a week ago for Mr. Culp. The board has been getting a lot of comments from the public via email, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot this evening as we consider our decision. There is, for everybody on the back table also, I know last week there were some questions about what the quarantine guidelines were. There is a flow chart on the back table. You can go online and there's a lot more supporting document, but this is a really good overview to get a sense of how it works and where we are as of today. I believe that was just released. Is that this week?
I think it was literally released on either Thursday or Friday of last week.
So I want to make sure everyone has that.
And if I may?
Yeah, absolutely.
So for those of you that were present at last board meeting and or have had the opportunity to watch the video of our last board meeting, there was a question that was yet to be answered. And so as presented by myself with respect to quarantine, and one of the things that was true last year in terms of ability to be eligible for a modified quarantine was predicated on everyone in a classroom setting being masked. So that has new guidance, required guidance for eligibility for modified quarantine has been rendered, and basically it no longer requires that everyone in a classroom be masked. However, only those masked will be eligible for modified quarantine if you are not vaccinated. So that was a question posed, and I also had brought that up, and I had anticipated that there was going to be a decision made about that. And I, if you recall, which you may not, I was thinking that it would land where it has. So as an update, that's what this flow chart indicates.
Okay. Thank you. So at this point, I believe we don't have any recognition under A. Is that correct, Mr. Culp?
That is correct.
So we will jump to hearing of the public. Once again, the board recognizes the value of public comment to school governance. If you wish to address the board, you may speak now. A copy of the board policy is BDDH-R on public participation. I believe we have copies of that available too. When addressing the board, we ask that you please state your name and address for the record, limit comments to 5 minutes or less, direct statements to the board, do not mention students or staff by name, and maintain reasonable decorum. Once again, the board will hear statements, but will not answer questions or engage in public debate during the board meeting. I will this evening, just as a matter of process, and I didn't do a great job of this last time. We will stick, since we have a lot of people speaking, to our 5-minute limit. When we get to 4 minutes, I'll just say 1 minute, and then when we're done, we'll have time, and that way we're just treating everybody fairly. So we do not have a sign up, so we just, sort of first come, first serve for public comments, and the reason I'm on my phone is because of the timer, I'm not texting during your comments.
My name's Katy Harfman, 1219 Lincoln Road. I'm a parent of 4 young children, 3 within the Grandview Heights schools entering 1st, 3rd, and 5th grades. I'm also a local pediatric specialty physician. This past year has been challenging for everyone in their personal and professional lives, and we all bring unique opinions, fears, and experiences to our decision-making for ourselves and our families as it relates to the current public health crisis. I came to the meeting last week and listened to members of our community speak passionately on both sides. While there were many differences in opinions, it was clear that a priority for everyone is keeping our kids in school for in-person education. While Grandview did an excellent and thoughtful job last year with the various models, there's no substitute for in-person education. Fortunately, the CDC, American Academy of Pediatrics, and local and state health agencies agree, and all strongly advise in-person education for the educational and emotional well-being of our children. They also all agree on universal masking. Why? Because they, like us, have our children's best interest in mind. This recommendation is based on a worsening state of the pandemic, with a more contagious variant and the need to keep our kids healthy, safe, and in school. Wearing a mask is one mitigation strategy that is effective, easy, safe, and well tolerated. Unlike last year when we were having discussions about concerns related to our youngest children wearing masks all day, we now have the reassurance of firsthand experience that our children can wear masks effectively while learning and socializing with their peers. Masks are not perfect. No one is proclaiming that masks alone will stop COVID, but they are an integral part of a layered mitigation strategy to minimize risk. The other strategies, distancing, hand washing, ventilation, when layered with masks, provide additive protection for our children. The most important strategy, vaccination, is not an option for my children or any of our youngest students. With this Delta variant, it's less a matter of if you're going to get it and more when you're going to get it. With a modified quarantine approved recently by the Ohio Department of Health, an unmasked, unvaccinated child in school will be subject to 7-day quarantines requiring a negative COVID test to return to school for each exposure. Masked children, even our youngest unvaccinated students, will be able to stay in school. If everyone's priority is truly keeping kids in school all year, masks are the only solution. Last week, I heard a desire for our schools and teachers to be able to focus on education, demonstrate critical thinking, and not pretend to be doctors. Luckily, the critical thinking and analysis of the risks and benefits of wearing masks has already been done by the experts. I saw a quote the other day that said, "When schools ignore the COVID safety advice of epidemiologists, doctors, and public health experts who have studied their entire lives to keep people healthy, they are actually sending a message that education doesn't matter." Our schools have always valued growth, not just academically of their students, but also personally as members of a greater community and world. In a situation where many children may feel powerless, wearing a mask and doing their part can be very empowering. The schools have always emphasized being safe, kind, responsible, and caring. Wearing a mask has always been as much about protecting others as it has been protecting ourselves. What a valuable tool to show our children our priorities. We have come together collectively as a community before to support our most vulnerable and those in times of need. Right now, our kids are most vulnerable,
1 minute.
and they need us to make the right decision for them, in line with public health guidance, and require masks for all in Grandview schools.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Lithgow, and I live at 1226 Parkway Drive. As board members, you are not only responsible for the health and well-being of your own kids, but you also have the crucial duty to take care of all of our students. I know you take it seriously. Thank you for doing the hard stuff. Those of you who know me know that I like numbers, so here are a few numbers for you. Since last week's meeting, Franklin County and Ohio have graduated from substantial community transmission of COVID to high community transmission. It's not a club that anybody wants to join. Grandview has a relatively high vaccination rate compared to other parts of the county and the state, but we still have a significantly higher rate of infection per 100,000 residents than our neighbors in Upper Arlington and Hilliard. Today in Ohio, there were 3,393 cases reported, the highest since early February, with a 7-day average test positivity of 7.7%, the highest since late January. It will get worse before it gets better. Personal and parental responsibility is a great concept if it weren't for the fact that kids breathe, and they breathe the same air as their classmates. It will not surprise you to know that I strongly support having all students, faculty, staff, and visitors wear masks indoors until COVID declines, along with all the other steps Ohio Department of Health recommends. My reasons? CDC, American Academy of Pediatrics, ODH, Franklin County Public Health, all strongly recommend it. Note that none of these have the authority to require it, or they probably would. If masks are mandated, when a student gets COVID, their contacts do not have to quarantine. If they aren't, school personnel, if they aren't mandated, school personnel will have to be detectives to find out if their contacts wore masks or need to follow quarantine protocols. It just sounds like a waste of good educational time. Masks become routine, as routine as wearing shoes, and with no debates between the parent and the child or between the students. Nobody's making fun of anybody if they're all doing the same thing. To me, it's logical to do everything in your power to keep our kids as safe and healthy as possible, and requiring masks for now is the best way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patty Zettler, 1241 Mulford Road. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today, and I want to start by thanking Haley Head, if she's here, for reading comments on my behalf last week when I wasn't able to attend in person. And I also want to thank Superintendent Culp and all of the members of the board for all of your work to provide our kids the best educational experience possible given the difficult circumstances that we're all in. And of course, thanks to the teachers and staff in the schools as well. I also want to thank all of the members of the community who are here to share their thoughts today and to listen to one another. I think it speaks highly of our community that so many of us are here. Last week, my comments explained my support for a layered public health approach to the fall that includes at least 3 key elements: vaccinations for all eligible, indoor mask use by all regardless of vaccination status, and improved ventilation, such as through open windows or portable air filtration systems in the classroom. Given the increased contagiousness of the virus and increasing cases among children, in my opinion, this is our best bet to stay fully open for the fall. And I should have mentioned I'm a parent of a soon-to-be second grader and a 4-year-old who will, in the future, be a student at Grandview Schools. In my professional life, I've also worked in public health law and regulation for over a decade, including as an attorney at the FDA, and I'm now a professor at Ohio State's Law School, where I teach and conduct research on issues related to health and public health law. And I'm currently serving on a National Academy of Sciences committee that's providing advice to the Federal Department of Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary for preparedness and response. So all of which is to say that since the pandemic has started, my work life has been very focused on aspects of COVID response. But an approach that has this layered public health approach, including universal masking, would be consistent with what CDC is recommending, consistent with what our local public health departments are recommending. It would also be consistent with what an increasing number of schools in Ohio are doing, and what my own employer is doing, what Ohio State is doing for the fall. I'm speaking again today to underscore that what we've learned in the last week has only made the case for this layered public health approach, including universal masking, stronger. As others have mentioned, as sort of just one example of what we've learned in the past week, CDC now classifies our county as a high transmission county, and that's the highest classification, the worst one, right? I also want to suggest that we should not be complacent about the safety of our schools based on the successes of the past year. Yes, our kids were largely safe in schools last year, thanks to so much of the great work you all did and our teachers and staff did. But that was with a layered public health approach that included masks, distancing, and fewer people in classrooms, among other things. And this year, we are facing a variant of the virus that is more contagious and that is hitting kids hard. There is, as others have mentioned, strong scientific evidence supporting universal masking as an effective and beneficial strategy to help prevent COVID transmission in schools. Yes, masks are slightly inconvenient and annoying to some, and we're all deeply frustrated, to say the least, that the pandemic continues and that we're still facing these issues. But far more inconvenient and frustrating, again, to say the least, would be our kids missing more school than they need to because of exposures, quarantine, or sickness. Our kids getting sick. Our kids getting members of our community sick because we failed to take simple steps to mitigate risk. We need to use all the tools available to us, including universal masking, to give our kids the best possible chance at a safe, fully in-person school year. Thank you for your time and consideration of my comments, and thanks again to everyone here.
Good evening. My name is Andy Betts. I live at 1041 Glendale Avenue. I came here straight from my shift at Grant Medical Center, where I work as a trauma and critical care nurse practitioner. I hope to never see any of you there, but if you do, give me a call. We're really good at what we do. I'm here tonight because my wife and I have 3 school-aged boys. Last year we chose online learning because we don't want them to get sick, but we are eager for them to return to the classroom this year. I also want to echo the chorus of professionals that you heard last week and you're hearing tonight. Mandatory masking is the safest way to begin the school year. When we are faced with a complex medical situation in the ICU or in the trauma bay, we're trained to do the simplest, best thing first to save your life. Getting kids, if you can't breathe, then we breathe for you. If you're bleeding to death, we stop the bleeding. Getting kids back to school safely is a complex situation, and the best first thing to do is to require universal masking. Once we've secured that best first action in this healthcare scenario, we move on to the next thing. And I believe that the next thing is improved ventilation and filtration within the classroom. Again, echoing what you've heard some last week and are hearing tonight, I believe that layered approach with improved ventilation filtration is our next best action beyond masking. Recent research from the Mayo Clinic, Harvard Healthy Buildings, the universities of Maryland and Minnesota have all shown that improved filtration and ventilation significantly reduces the risk of aerosol and droplet transmission of viral particles. The most recent study that the CDC just came out with showed a 90% reduction of viral particles on surfaces in a simulated classroom with the combination of masks and HEPA filters in the room. 90% reduction. And I heard Mr. Culp last week say that all of the building HVAC systems have been upgraded to a MERV 13 filtration system, which is a very important first step. And for those of you that don't know, a MERV 13 filter will remove about 85% of viral particles. And that's incredible, but the air has to be moving through the system to remove those particles. And so I believe the upgrades to the filtration system, in addition to room-specific filtration, can give us that extra layer of protection in addition to masks to reduce transmission. We are looking forward to a time when we don't need masks to be safe in school anymore. We all are. And I think that the entire community can agree upon anything that we can do to get us to that point safely and quickly is action that's worth looking into. Now, earlier this year, when Ohio lifted the mask mandate because we had seen a sharp decline in the case rate, it was after all the adults in Ohio had had the opportunity for vaccination, and we were all feeling pretty good about where we were. We were talking about school opening normally, and it was a very exciting time. We are seeing the case numbers rising sharply. As you've heard in some of the data already presented tonight, I'm seeing that at the hospital level. We are seeing a significant increase in adults, both admitted to the hospital and admitted to the ICU and on ventilators. So I'm experiencing this firsthand, and I think that the decisions that the board has to make you have to make those decisions based on the best, most current data that we have. And I think the data doesn't lie about where this is headed if we don't do something about it. We know that masks work despite the spread of disinformation. We know that improved ventilation works. I'm pleading with neighbors who don't agree with me to compromise on the side of safety. It's the logical and ethical thing to do for the health and safety of our children. All of our children deserve adults working together, using science, common sense, and civility to keep them safe. Requiring masks for everyone in our school building is the safest way to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Melissa Bondi. I live at 1340 Glen Avenue. I'm the parent of a rising freshman and sixth grader. As I shared with you last week, I'm a lawyer who's represented public school districts across the state for over 20 years. I know these aren't easy times to be an elected school board official. So once again, I want to thank you for all the hard work you do on behalf of our students. Like so many of you, I had thought last fall would be the strangest and hardest fall public education would see. I thought as we agonized over whether students would start remotely or hybrid or in person, those were the hardest decisions we would face. And I didn't think we'd be agonizing about these types of hard decisions again this fall. Last year, my kids were enrolled in Florida virtual school, the option offered by the board. And while it worked for us, we know that there's not that option this year. And that's okay, because I think we all are finally in agreement on something. Finally, we all agree that we want to send our students into our buildings alongside with their friends in person 5 days a week to learn. And we know that the best way to keep things normal for our students is to vaccinate them. But of course, none of our students under the age of 12 have been afforded the opportunity to be vaccinated. And that means we're going to be sending at least half of our student population, at least our K through 6 students, back into our school buildings without the very best protection available to them. And while it's true they didn't have this protection in the spring, at that time, at least our students were required to mask, and COVID transmission rates were falling, not rising. So I stand here again before you to ask that you implement and enforce a universal masking policy, ideally for all students, but at a minimum for K through 8. I've read the 4 proposals in the board agenda, and I know you have a K through 6. I'm advocating at a minimum K through 8 if you do that, but of course I like option 3 and 4 on your board agenda best, universal masking or including staff and visitors, or visitors as well. Last spring taught us that universal masking worked. It is easier socially for our students and for teachers to enforce when all are required to mask. Last year, we learned that our students didn't rebel against masks. They demonstrated they could do it effectively and were happy to be in school. We learned that quarantine is really disruptive to learning, and it will be especially more so when we don't have remote options. Finally, we learned that universal masking will prevent isolations and quarantines when there is that inevitable positive COVID exposure in the classroom. While we knew this last spring, it was confirmed again by the Ohio Department of Education this week in its K through 12 quarantine guidance, which I know you have in your board packet. In that guidance, they gave us a clear roadmap on how to keep our students learning in person. The guidance provides when we do 3 simple things: all staff and students are masked, physical distancing of 3 feet or more is maintained, and we have documented prevention strategies, which include screening and cleaning. If and when that COVID positive student is in our classroom, quarantine is not necessary, regardless of vaccination status. Let me say that again. During this pandemic, if we do those 3 things in our classroom, our kids get to stay in school. This means that this board requiring masks of staff and students, doing that will afford them the best chance of being able to remain in their classes, learning with their peers rather than at home and in isolation. For the people who say that masks didn't make a difference and have argued that the states with mask mandates had the same infection rate as those who didn't, they're not living under Ohio's quarantine rules. They're missing the point. Masks will keep our kids in school. Simply put, if we all want our students attending in person 5 days a week, then it must be part of our solution, part of the prevention strategies this board endorses. Last week, I told you about a superintendent that wasn't ready to make this decision, or their board. They were afraid of being sued. I know public educators want to do the right thing because recently several Ohio school districts have stepped up to do the right thing. Westerville, Worthington, and even our neighbors to the north last night, Upper Arlington, endorsed a mask mandate. They've all made the right decision. I'm asking you to join them in leading the way to protect our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
First, I want to thank Superintendent Culp and the entire board for the opportunity to have my words heard here tonight. And I also want to thank you for the last 20 months. The decisions this board have grappled with have not been easy. Instead of budgets and educational programs, we all know you've been managing a pandemic with unknown healthcare consequences for our children. The criticisms that some parents have leveled on you are unfair. But don't let that pressure stop you from doing what is right today. The actions you take here today will be judged by history. It will be studied by future students in this very district. It will be analyzed and debated in the history books of our Grandview Heights High School. Your actions today, in a small part of our world, will lay the groundwork to help our children fight future pandemics. There's no denying the gravity of the decisions that will lay ahead of you this school year. I do not envy your position, but I do entrust you to make the right ones tonight. There is no denying the fact that the Delta variant of COVID is hitting younger and younger people across the world, yet there's still some in our community that are fighting for no face masks this school year. The board cannot be so blinded and desensitized to the pleas, tears, and burden of healthcare workers like my own sister, my brother-in-law, some of the folks that we've heard from tonight. It cannot ignore overcapacity in ICUs in places like Louisiana and Texas. It can and will happen here too if we do not take the steps now. We cannot brush away all inconvenient truths and data sets as simple hype or overreactions. We must heed the warnings of those sickened by this pandemic. Most important, we must honor those that have needlessly fallen in this tragic pandemic. It is against that backdrop you make this decision tonight. Public officials, people in your positions that rushed to restrict mask mandates this summer are now seeing local hospitals and ICU units filled back up. Some public officials have even backtracked and are now pleading to help. And they're only pleading for help as their states face heartbreaking healthcare crisis. School boards in Texas are begging state leaders to allow face masks this autumn. Some are even contemplating lawsuits to protect students. This isn't political hyperbole. This picture is real, and it's devastating. We have one chance to get this right or suffer the same fate as those that didn't. My daughter, an incoming kindergartner and a second grader, deserve to look at us through the lens of hindsight and be confident that we did all we could here today to protect them. I made a promise to my second grader. Despite being vaccinated, I promise that until she is safe and vaccinated, I will continue to wear my mask. I wear it at work, I wear it at the grocery store, and I wear it at any other indoor place that's public. Public schools are no exception. I, as a father, made my promise to my 7-year-old. I wear a mask because I'm a father. I'm also my brother's keeper. My daughters, their friends, and their families, the very people listening to my words right now, you deserve the promise that I'm making. I wear a mask in solidarity with my unvaccinated children and their friends. It's not a burden to me. It certainly is not a loss of some unalienable right. It's a gift. It's a gift to posterity. It's a great honor to wear a mask for my daughters, their friends, and our community. Our small community, this board,
1 minute.
can help set the example. You can be on the right side of history tonight. We can help save parts of our community. I implore this board to support a universal mask mandate. Thank you.
Sir, could you please name list your
Yes.
name and
Amar
address?
Patel, 1333 Oakland Avenue.
Thank you.
Jeff Wall, 1130 Virginia Avenue. Spoke last week. I've got 3 students in the district and one, a 4th coming into pre-K this year. I had lots of remarks prepared about the CDC talking points, which you're hearing over and over and over and over, and why maybe we can apply common sense, community input, and come to a different conclusion, like many school boards have. But I think I'm going to jump to the point on it's just a mask. I've heard last week it's just a mask. I had one of the board say to me, hey, it's just a mask. The message seems to be, it's no big deal. Just shut up, wear your mask. Experts do disagree on this. The Wall Street Journal just published an excellent commentary on this called The Case Against Masks on Children. I sent it to this board. I hope you read it before you vote. It's not just people frustrated with wearing a mask or crazed about liberty or who they voted for or any of the stereotypes you want to place on somebody who doesn't think these do much. I won't repeat the Wall Street Journal article, but I do want to specifically note a few ways that masks do negatively affect our kids. One is very obvious. Masks are terribly distracting. Learning and teaching is hard enough. Masks make teaching and learning more difficult. School board ought to care about that. Masks impair development for some kids, younger kids especially. We know a high percent, like, 80%, you see projections between 70 and 90 some, of communication is nonverbal. And a ton of that comes from facial expressions and how we speak and how we say what we say. With the older kids, they're not getting nearly all the communication they should be. And with the younger kids, it's even worse. they're in critical formative years, and they're being robbed of the chance to even learn these essential life communication skills. We don't know how damaging this is. We have no idea. We're running an experiment in real time. And just personally, my third grade son has a serious speech delay. He was born with a cleft lip and palate. He's a tough kid. He doesn't ever complain. He works on it to overcome it. He's making good strides. It is absolutely clear he needs to see your face when you're speaking to him. He doesn't understand it as well if he doesn't, and he can't talk as well. It is observable in 5 minutes with the kid. Masks do matter. I just can't understand why anybody'd say it's just a mask. It impairs his growth and development. And I know he's not alone in this. I'm not here just advocating for my son, but others like him. And it frankly breaks my heart to think someone other than his parents decides they have the right to just rob him of that. And all to protect him from a virus that he has literally a zero chance of having a real problem from. Maybe it makes him sick. Maybe he misses a week. But you know, it's like 0.0003%. And everybody wants to talk Delta is more contagious. I've read that 100 times, because I do read on it. I'm not just, again, like to come up and be the contrarian.
1 minute.
Every report about the Delta variant says more contagious many times. Says maybe younger kids, younger people. Never once says more dangerous. Never once. There's got to be a reason for that. If I thought COVID was a risk to my kids, I would not trust one of these silly masks to do anything. I can't believe that's the science. I can't believe we're being told we're in the same problem we've been in for 18 months, and our solution is to keep doing the same thing that didn't work before. My son will have damage, and it will be worse than any COVID damage if you require him to wear a mask. Lastly, we all know masks make everything worse. For most people, they're not a neutral thing. They're more depressing. They just make everything suck more. Whatever you're doing, whatever layer of joy there is to it, it drops. And we want to do that to kids 7 hours a day for, I guess, forever, because this virus isn't going anywhere. We need a sensible mask policy. We need to encourage the wearing of N95s for anybody concerned or vulnerable, and let parents decide. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other, a couple more.
I guess I'll be very quick. For those who weren't here last time, I'm Dr. Jeremy Young. I'm a board-certified infectious disease physician. I'm an associate professor at Ohio State. I have a master's degree in public health, and I've been studying infectious disease epidemiology for more than 15 years. And I just wanted to come up here and say a couple things. Number one, none of these are CDC talking points. I've been studying this for a long time. I get no money from any company that makes masks. I get no money from any company that makes vaccines. And there's zero reason for me to lie to you. You have expert after expert coming up here, physicians, scientists, public health experts, telling you that masks work. They clearly do work. They're not perfect. Are they inconvenient? Yes. But I don't think they're going to impede the growth and education of our children. In fact, as has been stated here tonight, your children are much more likely to stay in school if we are masked and we don't have COVID outbreaks. And you know, for me, I just picture this scenario. Your children are standing near a snake, and you've got a herpetologist who their whole adult life has been studying snakes who says, that's a poisonous snake. And then you've got someone who's read things on the internet who has some feelings who says, that snake's not poisonous, don't worry about it. Can you imagine a world where you would trust that second person with your kids' lives about how poisonous the snake is? So I just want to reiterate that masks work. Also, this is not forever, as long as adults and children agree to be vaccinated. Again, as I said last week, the ultimate solution is not masks. And the plan of the CDC and public health experts and physicians is not to have people mask forever. Unfortunately, we're having a rise in cases because so many adults refused vaccination when it was available to them, a free, safe, effective vaccine. So for now, unfortunately, we have to go back to masks. Again, they are effective. These are not CDC talking points. None of us in this room, as far as I know, have been paid to come here to a local school board meeting and give CDC talking points. Oh, and I forgot to say, I live at 1190 Lincoln Road. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Elizabeth Mitchell. I live at 1144 Westwood Avenue. First of all, thank you to the school board for opening this forum up to us again. I am a parent. I have 3 kids. I have 2 5-year-old boys who are upcoming kindergartners. I have a 7-month-old infant. And I also think I have a pretty unique perspective because in addition to being a parent, I'm also a pediatric cardiologist. And therefore, I think I have a little bit of a unique perspective on the issue of coronavirus in children. These past 18 months have been incredibly stressful. They've been exhausting. And in addition to the stress and uncertainty, I have firsthand experience taking care of children who have become seriously ill from coronavirus infection. I don't know how many other people in this room can say this, but I've taken care of infants in the ICU with heart failure from coronavirus infection. I've taken care of 4 and 5-year-olds who have been ventilated and with coronary artery aneurysms. I've also taken care of adolescents who have some of the worst chest x-rays I've ever seen from coronavirus infection. I'd like to take a little bit of time this evening to dispel some myths. First off, kids can get and transmit COVID. Second off, based on my firsthand experience, kids can get very ill from coronavirus infection. The CDC recently published an article stating that up to July 7th, there have been 271 deaths of children aged 5 to 17 years of age. In addition, there have been 120 deaths of children aged 0 to 4. In my opinion, that is far too many deaths from a preventable virus. The third myth I'd like to dispel is that masking works. There are several studies that have shown that even in areas of high community transmission, that masking in schools kept kids in schools and that there was minimal transmission. Last week, someone said teachers shouldn't be forced to be doctors. I 100% agree. So I implore the board and everyone here to follow your medical professionals. Let's follow the AAP guidance. Let's follow the CDC and the Franklin County Public Health Department, as well as the medical professionals in the community in support of masking for our kids, regardless of vaccination status. I think we can all agree that we share some similar goals. We'd like to keep our kids safe. We'd like to keep our kids in school. We'd like to prevent our teachers from having to regulate who is supposed to wear a mask and who is not. And finally, I think one important point is that if masks are made optional, I think that it is safe to say that there will be bullying, there will be peer pressure, there will be issues related to who has to wear a mask and who doesn't. I think that's an added stress that our teachers, frankly, do not need. I'd like to reiterate what Dr. Young just said. This is a temporary measure, and it's one that I hope that the board makes in support of universal masking to help keep our kids safe and in school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent Culp, board members, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Nathan Young. Along with my wife and 2 boys, I reside at 1760 West 1st Avenue in Grandview. My youngest son is a rising 4th grader, and my oldest son is a rising 6th grader. In my discussion with you today, I'm not going to express my desire for a mask mandate or a mask optional policy. Rather, I would like to focus this discussion on risk assessment. Through the duration of this pandemic, the lower bounds of risk assessment have by and large been absent from the discussion. We need to have a serious discussion of our risk assessment related to COVID and if our risk assessment comports with our risk assessment related to other facets of our human experience and our human existence. How are we going to measure our risk assessment? Do we measure our risk in terms of death, in terms of hospitalizations, in terms of serious hospitalizations, in terms of cases? How much COVID is too much COVID? Admittedly, I do not have the answer to this question. How much COVID is too much COVID to watch my child participate in a sporting event with neither one of us wearing a mask? Is it acceptable for me to hold the view that my child should be masked in a classroom but not be masked while participating in a close contact sporting competition or while dining in a restaurant in close proximity to other unmasked children? As individuals, these are all questions we contemplate as we navigate through this pandemic. As policymakers, it is my opinion that you should establish and communicate a framework that guides the level of COVID that is acceptable in our community before establishing new mandates or revoking mandates that exist. Again, I ask, how much COVID is too much COVID? Do cases need to be below rate X? Why was number X chosen? What data is guiding that threshold? Do the threshold variables of measurement make sense related to other areas of life? I understand that you are receiving and relying upon guidance from several medical experts in various governing bodies. As policymakers, you should be asking your advisors what data is guiding their decisions and recommendations. You should be asking your advisors how much COVID is too much. What is an acceptable level of COVID to mandate or not mandate something? These decisions need to be based on data. I fully understand the difficulty you have in such matters. It is often said in times of personal turmoil, the truth will set you free. In the context of this discussion, the data will set you free. Regardless of your decision, this board owes it to this community to fully communicate why a decision is being made. The rationale could be based on recommendations from experts, but such recommendations need the backing of data, and we need to know what that data is. In conjunction with the data, this board should also contemplate and formulate a policy position that begins to answer the question, how much COVID is too much COVID? In closing, I would like to address those who are on the COVID risk-averse spectral end. Whether it is in 90 minutes or in 90 days, there is going to come a time when this board makes the decision for masks to be optional at Grandview schools. In serving the full community, the time when the board does make this decision will seem too early and unsafe for those who are risk-averse to COVID. I encourage my fellow citizens who sit on the COVID risk-averse spectral end to take the necessary steps to make your personal environment safe regardless of the individual actions of your fellow community members or the policy positions that this board may take. If you have not done so already, please get vaccinated. In fact, I encourage all those who can to get vaccinated. For those risk-averse individuals, please wear a mask, and not just any mask. Please wear an N95 mask or any other appropriate personal protective equipment that comports with your individual comfort level of risk. May we be guided in our efforts and all of us remain safe. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today.
My name's Sarah Schroeder. I live at 1137 Grandview Avenue, and thank you for the opportunity to address you all. I will say that I'm a parent of an incoming kindergartner and also a general pediatrician in the area. I would like to thank all my colleagues who are here today for all of their comments, and I would say that I agree with everyone who is asking for universal masking. I just have a few points that I want to add, kind of as a general pediatrician. In response to some of the things that I heard today, I would say that it's very hard to learn when you can't breathe or be in school. And in order to keep kids in school, we can all see the algorithm. Mandatory masking will allow that to happen. There are some devastating consequences of not being in school. I'm sure you guys are all aware of IEPs and 504 plans. Those really can't be implemented when we're not in school. I can't tell you how many kids with ADHD I have that failed last year. They couldn't access the virtual learning, they couldn't have their IEP, they couldn't have their 504 plan, and they failed. I work in the Hilltop, so a little bit different resources than here. But I have parents who had to quit school, quit work in order to take care of their kids who had an IEP because they couldn't get their kid to log on. The kid was old enough to stay home, but they couldn't get the kid to log on, so they quit their job and they suffered financial consequences as a result. I also want to say that kids do die. Healthy kids do die of COVID, and 120,000 primary caregivers have died from COVID in the US alone. We also don't know the long-term damage from COVID. I have seen that kids do get long COVID, and I have seen the consequences of that and the missed school as a result of that. One point about a couple of times it's come up that kids should just wear an N95 mask. I don't know if you guys know how N95 masks work, but in order for them to actually work, it has to be fit tested. That actually has to happen yearly, or if you've had like a 10% body weight change, and so kids actually can't wear an N95 mask. And for those who said that we're risk averse, I fully plan to vaccinate my kid. I've been stalking the people in Columbus who are doing the trial to get my kid into the trial. But as many of you guys would know, or parents might know, the trial is full and they're not accepting people because so many people want their kids in the trial. So this is a temporary measure. I think once kids are able to be vaccinated, things will be very different. But as half of our students are unable to be vaccinated, I really think universal masking is really the only way to keep kids in school and to give them what they deserve, which is the ability to learn safely. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other public comment? I do believe we have a couple statements to read. I just want to make sure, does anybody else want to speak before we do that? Haley?
My name is Haley Head. I work for the Board of Education and in the Office of the Superintendent. We received two letters to be shared at tonight's meeting. In the interest of time, would you like me to read the entire letters or summarize? Okay. Directly, I'm summarizing in one sentence each at the end of each letter. The first one is from Mary McCarran, and she lives at 1284 West First Avenue. In summary, she writes, I urge you to require masks in Grandview school buildings. The second letter we received was from Jeremy Patterson. His address is also 1284 West First Avenue. In summary, one of his final comments is, in my mind, the sensible decision is clear: uniform mask wearing to reduce the risk of COVID transmission.
Thank you. All right, let's call any other public comment. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, in case you have just stepped in since we started, we will follow the order of the agenda. We have a couple other things. We'll try to do those as efficiently as possible. But we do have a school district to run aside from masks. So construction update, Mr. Culp.
Thank you. Good news is we have passed all of the zoning requirements, the building inspections, and we have full occupancy. We are in the process of doing the punch list items, and each day it gets closer and closer and closer and closer to being quote unquote finalized. One of the exciting things, at least from my perspective, is they're finalizing the striping in the gym, and it really looks spectacular. We also are finalizing the sidewalks so that there is ADA access and connectivity to be able to walk the paths in lieu of the fencing that's going around the high school. I think probably the final thing I'll add is they are actually beginning demo on the high school on Monday. Open house this Saturday at 11:30 in the new Larson Middle School. 11:30 to 2:30.
And to be clear, when we say demo of the high school, that does not mean the building is getting torn down.
No. The internal demolition is what I meant. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We have several sets of meetings from the last 5 board meetings. I would entertain a motion for all 5 of those, 6A through E.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussions on those minutes?
I might abstain from one because I wasn't there. I was there for the other 4. but
Okay.
I don't think that'll affect the vote
No, you'll be fine.
overall.
Okay. Beth?
Okay, Mrs. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Abstain?
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassmuth?
Aye.
Building and department reports, once again, thank you for all the administrators that submit those to us. For those of you new at board meetings, those are a part of the packet that really gives you a flavor for what's going on in the building in real time. So I'd recommend taking a look at those. Committee reports, we do have an MOU that I think we'll talk about from the core team, the recommendation from the core team on that when we get to the MOU later in the agenda, which is kind of a big deal. I'm excited about that. Are there any other committee reports before we get to the superintendent's report? Okay, Mr. Culp.
So I know there are a lot of parents of incoming kindergartners, so I wanted to be sure to mention that there will be an ice cream social this Monday, August 16th at 5:15 at Stevenson Elementary. And then secondarily, I wanted, if you don't mind, Lisa, I'm sorry to embarrass you, but if you would please stand up. She is our new principal of Stevenson Elementary, so welcome. Welcome, and we are so fortunate to have her. She is going to be fantastic and rose to the top, and I just am so excited to work with her in the coming, hopefully, many years. So welcome to our family, welcome to Grandview, and you are going to make us all better.
Well, thank you guys so much. I'm humbled and honored to be the new principal. I know that I have giant shoes to fill, but I've gotten a chance to get to meet some of our incoming kindergartners this week as they've come in. So that's been a joy, and really nobody has a better job than I do. So thank you guys so much. I'm looking forward to working with all of our elementary families.
Ms. Collier?
Okay, so I shared the financial report with each of you, the presentation, in lieu of sharing it on a projector tonight, but I just wanted to highlight a few points from that presentation. So we did not have a regular meeting in July, so I wanted to share a couple quick highlights from fiscal year 21 and where we stood financially at the end of the year. So our revenues were about 3% over our budget. That was primarily from the Grandview Yard development revenue. That development has continued to occur a little bit quicker than what our projections showed. Expenditures, we were at about 95.5% for the year. And then we finished the year with our revenues exceeding expenditures by just over $2 million. So that is pretty remarkable in a year where we were dealing with COVID and all of the extra expenses and things that we had. We did utilize some federal money to offset about $300,000 of our PPE, sanitizing, masks, all those things. In particular, the additional furniture that we purchased in the spring so that we could keep students distanced as much as possible. So fortunately, we were able to use some of that federal stimulus money. So that's all good news I wanted to share. So just a couple quick updates on where we are right now in our fiscal year. We have gotten some tax advances. Our final tax settlement is going to be coming on Friday, so I'll have more information once we do get that final settlement. I got the information from the city today on our Grandview Yard settlement as well, and we're a little bit ahead of where our projections were for the calendar year, so that's good news as well. Because we finished the year in a positive financial position, I have been able to add some of our cash balance into our investment reserve to maximize interest earnings. Our construction fund, our fund balance is about $27 million right now, again, starting from $55 million at the start of the project. Not much change in the permanent improvement fund. The last thing I wanted to share is just the updated facility funding sources that I have shared the presentation with all of you. The numbers have been updated through July. So in particular, it reflects the additional interest earnings in our construction fund.
Thank you. Any questions for Beth? Can I have a motion to accept the?
Can I ask a quick question?
I
Sorry.
apologize.
That's
got ahead of
fine.
myself.
Just a question. I was just noticing in your presentation the transfers that had to be done to food and athletic, which were no surprise. We knew that was coming. In the coming year, I know that the federal government has again said that they will provide free lunch. Now, given that we would be in school full-time all the time, I'm just curious, and I don't want to take everyone's, maybe I should say this for finance committee, but do you expect, now the difference between when kids are paying for lunch here versus when we get reimbursed, like, is there a difference? Do you expect, I guess for the coming year, do you expect that we will again have to subsidize that?
So that's a great question. So we have, even before COVID, we have always had to subsidize the food service fund. The nature in particular of our high school with open lunch, it's just very, very challenging, and you know, space has always been a consideration. So because of the nature of our program, we have always had to subsidize that, and that is actually not unique to Grandview. Pretty typical, pretty common among school districts. I did talk to Kyle Mahan, our food service director, and while the subsidy is going to be in place again next year, the rate has actually increased. So we are going to get more reimbursement per lunch served than what we did this past year. So he expects that subsidy to be less next year than what we had to provide this year.
And I guess put another way, for like a single meal served, how does the reimbursement compare to what we would charge if we were not, you know, providing it for free lunch?
So I can get you I can follow up and get you those exact numbers after tonight's meeting.
Yeah.
That's not a big deal.
One thing, you know, when we've looked at this in the past, I know we got other business we want to get to, but it's an important point. You know, the way that fund is set up, we call it a loss.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always found that interesting because we don't talk about how much we lost on science books this year because we had to buy them, or how
Right.
much we lost on markers, but it's just the way that's set up.
Yeah,
You-
and to
you know,
be clear, I'm not asking that to be critical. It's just more of
But it's
curiosity.
categorized that way because of really a financial procedure that's required, and so then that ends up, you know, that's a legitimate question to ask. but-
Right, subsidizing something, it sounds negative. It's not meant negatively.
So, okay, thank you, good question. Any other questions for Beth? If I could have a motion to accept the June and July 2021 financial reports, and a motion to accept the payment of the June and July 2021 bills?
So moved.
Second. Beth, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Doucet?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassman?
Aye.
Under actions for the Board of Education, we have 4 items, which are really 4 options, which, you know, we're asking the board to consider one of those. We've had this language in front of us for some time now. I'd be willing to sort of kick off the discussion and making a motion for action by the Board of Education for option number 4, masking resolution for K-12 staff on ground, inside school buildings, 24/7. There'd be a second for that motion?
No. Wait you for it. Mr.
Kevin?
Gusak.
All right, discussion?
Can I just clarify? I mean, I've read all these, but I just wanted to make, on number 4, this doesn't, I mean, this wouldn't usurp, I understand that you're talking about everyone on school grounds, so not just during the school day. It would not usurp any other requirements by like the Ohio High School Athletic Association when it comes to, you know, athletes or whatnot. Like, athletes would still be governed under those. It's not like we're saying if somebody came here to play volleyball, all the volleyball players have to ask.
Right.
We'd be saying the spectators do.
I mean, to oversimplify, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the language in that sort of puts us where we were last year.
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean, there
So
may
it
be a
doesn't exempt
nuance or
us from,
two
you
in
know,
there.
having a school play or any, it's just basically saying we're talking about common sense requirements for masking for outsiders.
Indoor.
Indoor.
Right,
In our
indoors,
school
exactly,
buildings.
right.
is the difference between, the difference between 3 and 4 is 3 is K-12 masking during the school day for staff and students. 4 is not only K-12 masking for staff and students during the school day, but also indoor requirement.
Yes.
Evening events.
Right.
So a volleyball game, visitors
Yeah,
would need to wear a mask.
right.
Any other questions or discussions?
Yeah,
on
the resolution doesn't specifically state that we will be revisiting this November 11th, but that can.
Well, here's, right. So I was going to talk about this after we took action, but now's a good time. So, and I discussed this last week, but I think it's very important for folks to understand that, once the board makes this decision, then the board will make a decision to change it. So we're not empowering the superintendent to make that decision. There are districts where this falls within the superintendent and the board would not vote for a mask requirement. So with that being said, I would sort of get on a little bit of a soapbox to say to the community, the man to my right has a school district to run, and if you're upset with this decision, that lies with the 4 of us here and the 5 board members. And the way that decision changes is if one board member wants to to reverse that, I'll put it as the chair on any agenda at any request. It would have to have a motion and a second and a vote of the majority of the board. And I don't mean to be so precise about it, but that's how it works, and I think everybody needs to know. So if the motion on the floor right now passes, it changes when a board member says they want to put the item on the agenda. Someone makes a motion, someone makes a second, and the majority of the board votes for that. With that being said, Mr. Culp would like to come back to us in November with updates. Now, we've all learned we might have a special meeting in 2 weeks with updates. We might, I think there's a certain amount of flexibility that's important there, and that's why I want to be clear. And I would, for those of you that are watching this video and those in the audience, if you're not happy with this decision, the decision's on the board. And the superintendent has brought the board 4 varying options that are in front of you.
That the board asked for.
That the board asked for. So the way it changes, and I will tell every board member here and Eric listening, I will put it on the agenda, whatever you want, any board meeting moving forward. Just make the request a week ahead of time, and it's there. And everybody knows, you can do that. Okay? Is that fair? I feel like I'm talking to my middle school son. Sorry. That works.
Yeah, so, in short, Andy will provide an update at the November meeting. However, any school board member has the ability to raise the issue again as they see fit.
Yes.
And the intent of setting the November date was, regardless of your opinion, under an overt desire to say that we are going to revisit this and it isn't a decision that will be unilaterally made for the entire year. And so that was the intent. And so, the information and updates do change. And so it certainly could be before November. It could be after November.
Right. Any other questions or discussion from the board?
I think we have, speaking for myself, I think we could talk about the Centers for Disease Control, the American Academy of Pediatrics, all the stats. They've been hit a multitude of times. I don't want to waste anyone's time with that. I do think from being on the board, it's important to know the community input that we have gotten, that we have received. This community is reached out very in favor of masking, maybe to the point of 5 to 1. Like it's the community. We're as good as the information for community input as we get, and the community by and large has reached out. We've seen at last week's meeting, we're very pro-masking. We've seen it this week, this meeting, we're very pro-masking. tomorrow I will start my 18th year in education, and I can say that having the kids back is the number one game, the number one in the game. We need them in the schools. I can teach my best when my kids are in my classroom. There's no two ways about it. I can do it hybrid, I can do it online. It's not the best. Having the kiddos, which they hate it when I say that, but I do, in the classroom is the most important thing. I did not find it to be disruptive last year to have masks on. I mean, it's kind of like wearing a hoodie. That's me as an educator speaking. It wasn't as disruptive as I thought it was going to be. We start tomorrow, so the kids are already around the hallway. They're all in the district I teach. They're all wearing their masks. It is what the adults in the room put forward. If we kind of make a mandate and say this is the way it is, and move on for the sake of making it, the kids are going to be okay. To me, I'm like, the kids, I think, have had less issues with masks from my purview, and that's not 100% than the adults. So I haven't seen the disruption in the classroom. The community has said it. I heard Governor DeWine, I think it was 2 weeks ago, was on the news saying if he could make a mandate to do it, we would mask K-12. Mashika Roberts from Columbus Public Health has said if she could make a mandate, we would. So I'm not going to beat the alphabet soup of science. We've heard from our community, especially our community in the science and health field, that has said this is the thing to do. We need to take care of our schools. We need to take care of our kiddos. Oh, I just did it again. But I think this is the move that is proactive. It is caring. It is kind. Let's band together. Let's get through this and let's move forward. I do agree with one of the comments it's an interesting point with how much COVID is too much. Right now, we don't have that answer, but in the meantime, I think this is the correct move to mask, and also to do this when we have sporting events, like we're reflective of what's going on. And our schools should be reflective of what happens after school. So, thank you.
Sure, I'll just give my 2 cents just because I feel the need to explain my vote, although we haven't even officially done that yet. But I won't go on about it, but I feel like many people who spoke here have done so very eloquently, and I thank everybody for speaking. And what's clear is no matter which side you fall on, I know the people of this community really care about their kids and want the best for them. So I am not an expert in public health, though I've read more about it in the past 18 months than I ever thought I would. And given that I'm no expert in public health, though, I lean on those who are. And I feel like, yes, you can find people who would disagree, but by and large, the vast majority fall on one side of this issue, and I trust the voices we're hearing from. So I want the best for our kids, but I'm also very pragmatic about it, and I know that we're never going to kick this thing 100%. That's not the goal, but it'd be nice if more than half of our population that we serve has the ability to be vaccinated. It would be nice if we could stop seeing a rise in cases right now. We've seen what's happened in the South and in other countries, so it'd be nice to feel a little bit more secure, get some more kids vaccinated, and we're going to get through this. As many people have said, it's temporary. It truly is. I see the light shining on the horizon, so we're getting there. But yeah, I think I'm in agreement. This is what we need to do for now. And thanks to everybody who spoke, truly everybody. I appreciate that you all took the time to come and let us hear your feelings on it. Like I said, it's clear you all care for your kids. You have anything else to add?
Beth, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Doucet?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassmuth?
Aye.
I did receive a text from Mr. Bondi, even though he's not a voting member. Just note for the minutes that he would have supported the resolution had he been here. So, all right, thank you. Moving on, we have We have a memorandum of understanding that's a pretty big deal, quite frankly. We talked about this at our special board meeting 2 meetings ago. Any of the changes between now and then has been a little bit as we've worked out the numbers on the finances, but in spirit, it's the same. As a reminder, the school district owns currently the land that would connect Fairview and obviously the First Avenue parking lot. This memorandum of understanding basically will turn that into city land, and the city has intentions to work with us for what we present on the Planning Commission on August 18th, which would reopen Fairview and probably more excitingly ultimately make the First Avenue parking lot a city park. Still plans on development. Our amount of parking spots stays the same. It gets consolidated. I think it makes a nice site plan overall. For folks that are interested in that, there is a Planning Commission meeting on the 18th of August, and they will accept public input there also. But we've been working in concert with the city on that. So this MOU is an important step to get done. It is, quite frankly, time sensitive because the city is going for relatively large grant and federal funding sources, which would be great if we could bring those dollars to Grandview, even if it's on the city front as opposed to the school front. So the core team would like to put forward the memorandum of understanding and highly support it as written. So if I could have a motion for that, please.
So moved. Second.
All right. Any other questions or discussions? I know we spent like an hour on it
Yeah.
2 meetings ago, but it's a big deal.
It is a big deal. I would just say, like, I'm really excited about it. When I look at what the plan is right now, it's really great. I think it looks really great. I know a lot of work went into it.
Well, and I definitely want to thank our partners at the city. I've said it 1,000 times, when we've all agreed in concept, and it's been a ton of work. So, Feliz and Mayor Kearns have just done a phenomenal work getting that along. So if there's no other discussion, I'll get Beth, you call the roll for.
Mrs. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
Ms. Wassman?
Aye.
All right. Not much less land to maintain, right? Under board policy and procedure, we have the final reading on several board policies. If I could have a motion to approve board policy A1, A through J, please.
So moved.
Second.
As a reminder, the first meeting would have been at our last regular meeting, not the special meeting in between. Any questions or discussion on those policy items as presented? Beth?
Mrs. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassman?
Aye.
Under business and finance, we have 13 items. If I could have a motion for business and finance 1 through 13, please.
Mr. Truitt, can I provide one piece of clarification?
Yes.
So item number 8 needs.
Yep, you're correct. I
From the record, it's the same memorandum of understanding that you just voted on.
yeah, thank you. So we'll do a motion for B 1 through 7, 9 through 13. We don't want to give them that land twice.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussions?
Can I have a quick question? I'm just curious too about the budget reserve. Do you know, probably not offhand, you can get back to me, the last time that we ever had to touch a budget reserve? I know that it wasn't always uniformly.
That's a good question. I will have to do a little bit of digging into that. I know that it was set up at the time that the school district's tax base kind of took a hit when Big Bear left. I don't know that it's ever been tapped into. There is a board policy that states when that budget reserve can be used, and it's essentially in the event of catastrophic revenue loss. And I don't think that we have met that criteria since it was established, but I will double check and follow up for sure.
Is there any kind of, within the parameters, is there any ceiling on it? Once it reaches, if it ever reaches X percent of total revenue, that it would be like, okay, at this level, you no longer do 5%, or is that?
No, so the policy does say that the budget reserve should be maintained at 5% of general fund revenues. So as the last few years, as our revenues have increased slightly each year, at the end, after the end of the fiscal year,
I see.
then we look at what those actual revenues were, and then we
Okay,
adjust
I
it
thought-
to meet that 5%.
Now I understand. No, I thought it was that you deposited a certain percentage of prior year's revenues, but I get it now. You always hold it at 5%, okay.
Yeah.
And we were not following that
Right, I
policy at
remember
one
that.
point in our history. We just had a flat amount in there, and the board at that time had a discussion whether to change the policy to match what we were doing, or change what we were doing to match the
Right.
policy, and we changed what we were doing to match the policy. So that sounds like a great topic for the finance committee
Yeah,
to
no,
dig into.
I have no problems. I just was forgetting.
I mean, it is good, because we did have a good discussion when the board was different, and it probably would, in all seriousness, be good to revisit that discussion, because that's serious money. It's serious money, so. Any other questions on the business and finance motion on the floor? Beth?
Okay, Mrs. Gebhardt? Aye. Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassman?
Aye.
We have several items under personnel. You'll notice a long list of building move stipends, and the board discussed that, I believe, back when we discussed doing that. So this is just the that coming to fruition as folks are moving. And I can tell you, looking at this list of teachers, I can guarantee we've gotten a lot more than one day of moving out of them. I don't think they get packed their room. So I do appreciate, it's exciting when you do a building project like that, but it is a lot of work on every single staff member. So, that's the little sort of least we can do there. So if I could have a motion for personnel C 1 through 18, please, or yes, 18, which also includes the Kids Club school year calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussions or questions on any of the other
I
personnel
would
items?
just
There's
only-
quite a bit in there.
I would just only point out, you may know Doug and Megan daughters. Megan is a community member, and she will be providing OG services. So I share that with you, and just in case that by chance you may have missed that. A nice connection, in my judgment.
Yes. Absolutely. I do appreciate getting all those supplementals on there ahead of time. I know that's a lot of work, and this board has asked for that in the past, so thank you. So if there's no other questions or discussion, could I have Beth, can you call the roll?
Mrs. Gebhardt? Aye. Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
Ms. Wassman?
Aye.
All right, under co-curricular and extracurricular activities, there is a field trip on the agenda for the boys and girls cross-country team to the Tiffin cross-country meet. If I could have a motion for E1, that field trip, please.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Beth?
Mrs. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassman?
Oh, aye, sorry.
She's trying to figure out, how to seal up this next one on here.
You're not wrong, I was reading it.
Molly, you in?
I'm always in. I love being a
Does
delegate.
anybody want to be an alternate delegate?
Mr. Bodie does.
You want to, Kevin?
Sure.
All right, then I will make a motion that Molly be the OSBA Capital Conference delegate and Kevin the alternate for the Capital Conference coming up in November.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? All right, Beth?
Mrs. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassman?
Aye.
All right, I do not believe we have any items for executive session this evening, is that correct? So I would offer we don't have other items for discussion, so I guess
Not
y'all are
today.
out of luck. That's usually on there. That was not cut on purpose, I promise. So I'll make a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
I'll give Molly the motion, is there a second?
Yes.
Second, Kevin?
Second.
Beth?
Mrs. Gebhardt?
Aye.
Mr. Gousset?
Aye.
Mr. Truitt?
Aye.
And Ms. Wassman?
Aye.
Thank you.